The truth is, making melodies is super easy. It just all comes down to knowing the right tricks. It's good to start out by making a harmony. This just means chords, and it's pretty much what you're gonna base your melody around. To start making your chords, you wanna start out with some bass notes. These are gonna be the lowest note in your chord, and I just have a 1/6 progression here. The numbers just refer to scale degrees, which basically means we number each note in the scale, starting from 1 all the way to 7. Then turn those bass notes into triads. Triad just means 3 notes. And to build your triad, you just go up 1 note in the scale, skip it, place the next note, and then repeat that process. From here, I like to decorate my chords. This means adding in some more notes than just the triads you already have. There's a lot of different things you can add and a lot of music theory terms you can get into, but my rule of thumb is just add whatever sounds good to you. And depending on your instrument, it might be beneficial to spread your chord notes out a bit, or you might just like different voicings for your chord notes, so pitching your chord notes up or down to different octaves. Then I layered some of those chord notes. I have just the first triad here. It's a minor chord, so it's going to sound a little bit more sad. And then the next chord is an implied major 7th chord. Music theory sounds complicated, but all that really means, I layered that 7th chord I had from before, and I removed this chord note here. And because this is a major triad, and there's that major 3rd interval between these 2 notes, removing that note will get rid of that happy sound, and adding in that 7th is going to give it that sad tone that I want. And then I just arpeggiated those chords by pressing Alt-A, and I did this to turn it into more of a texture. And to turn it into a little bit more of a texture, I added in this gross beat preset from my Overgloom trap bundle, as well as a fair bit of reverb and stereo width to make the sound a little bit wider. Then for this intro bit here, I automated some EQ. And to do something like that, all you need to do is right click the knob you want to automate, press the create automation clip option. That's going to create something like this. Then you can double click on top of it where it says slot 10, whatever. This will open up the automation editor. Press LFO to turn it into an LFO. You can tweak the settings here, increase the amount if you want. And then I also just created an automation clip for the speed knob. One thing that's really important for your melodies is adding in some kind of depth. This just means filling up the lower end of your frequencies. So I've added in a bass here layered with my bass notes. I made sure to leave this empty room here too, because I wanted to give my bass a little bit more bounce by adding in these other bass elements that are a little bit more rhythmic. And the way you can make things bouncy with your melodies is by incorporating notes that are hitting off beat. It creates a kind of rhythmic tension. By the way, most of the sounds that I'm using for this beat are from my brand new Blur melody kit. It's half off right now, so check it out. Now getting into what actually is a melody, a sequence of single notes, we have this god-awful pattern. And what dictates how a melody sounds is the space between the individual notes, as well as their relationship to the chords. So for this first melodic phrase, these 3 notes are in the chord, so they're all gonna sound harmonious with the chords. But because this one's not in the chord, it's gonna create some dissonance and add some tension to my melody. Additionally, it's going to add some tension because it's just a half step away from that next note. Now with your melodies, repetition is super important. That's one of the things that makes your melodies catchy, and it also makes them feel structured. So a good way to go about your melody once you have that first bit is to copy it over, change up some of the notes, and you can also add in some other notes if you want. And just like the basses, it's also super important to leave space in your melodies because that's how you leave room in your beat. And in that empty space, I just added in these melodic phrases. Same thing, they're very similar, just really minor changes. Now, another way you could go about making melodies is taking more of a stepwise approach. This just means most of your note changes are moving by step, so they're going to the note that's next to it in the scale. But you can use these bigger jumps to create more climactic parts at the end of your melody. And another really important thing to keep in mind is you're going to have a focal point for your melody, so there's going to be a note you come back to quite often. And the trick here to this melody in particular is I copied the first half over, pitched it up an octave because that's going to add some energy to it, and added in this last note for the melody to resolve because it transitions into another section of the beat. And that other section of the beat that I mentioned comes in with the sequence of notes. None of the notes are playing at the same time, so technically it is a melody. However, it's pretty much just based on chords. And instead now my bass notes are 1, 6, 7. So I've added in that 7th from my previous progression. From there I added in these chord notes, which are the same notes from my first chord. And then I added in these non-chord notes to create some dissonance in this melody. And then I pretty much just copied that over, made some slight adjustments to fit the 6th and 7th chord, but it's okay to repeat the same thing because as the chord changes, the melody playing along with the chord is going to reharmonize. So it's going to get a different feel with the chord changes. One thing I find that's really important with your melodies is layering. This means using different sounds to play the same pattern. Now you can do this to create a more full sound, a more distinct sound, whatever you're trying to go for. Then following the bass notes of the chords we're implying, I added in this bass pattern. Again, it's really important to remember playing notes off beat is going to create bounce. So all of these red notes are hitting on beat and everything else is creating bounce around it. Another really important thing to keep in mind is that note length plays a role in the bounce. So you can create more of a bouncy vibe with short, choppy notes. You'll see what I mean. Up until now, we were just implying that new chord progression, but here we're solidifying it a bit more by playing the power chords. This just means you have the 1st and the 5th note of the chord, or the easier way of thinking of this is just by moving it up 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These chords are important because they sound godly and powerful. I added in this melody. With that, it follows a lot of the principles we've talked about already. I've got my focal point here, but what's really important is this big jump here. And from this note, we'd be jumping up to the 7th because this note is 7 scale notes away. Because this jump is big going from the 1st to the 7th, it's going to sound really climactic in our melody. And that's usually a good thing to end on with the 4th or 8th bar of your melody. Now, if you want another video like this for mixing or whatever, let me know down in the comments. I'm also going to be giving away a free copy of my Blur melody kit to one lucky commenter, so don't miss out. And here's the full thing.